The Trumpet Daily program begins right now.
Today's world news, what it means, where it's taking us.
I bring you the one and only possible message of world peace.
This is a message of hope, tremendous hope. And he said unto me, you must prophesy again.
The Trumpet Daily program begins right now.
Director, one other question on this. Tulsi, as well as President Trump, used the word treason. Is there a statute of limitations on treason?
Well, Maria, what I would say is this, is there is no doubt in my mind that the people that we just talked about conspired. They conspired against President Trump. They conspired against the American people. And so I'll leave it to Pam Bondi and our Department of Justice, Kash Patel and our FBI to investigate the conspiracy to do what and what charges that they're capable of bringing. But again, I don't think statute of limitations are going to impact, because in a conspiracy, Maria, the statute of limitation doesn't start to run until the last act in furtherance of that conspiracy. And Maria, part of why this is so important is the people behind this are still furthering the conspiracy. They're refusing to admit or acknowledge what they did in 2016 and what they did in 2020 was wrong.
Our audience knows this, thanks to you and thanks to Devin Nunes. Our audience is well aware of what took place here, but we want to see accountability. Many of the statute of limitations have expired. It's been almost 10 years for many of these folks who did this. But John Brennan testified to Congress, and so did Hillary Clinton, within 5 years. I think it was in 2020 and then again in 2021. Are those statute of limitations still live?
Well, Maria, so part of what came out last week was about how John Brennan, Clapper, Comey, they all pushed the known fake Steele dossier into intelligence community assessments and as the basis for Crossfire Hurricane and all that. But what hasn't come out yet, and what's going to come out, is the underlying intelligence that I have spent the last few months making recommendations about final declassification and sent that to the Department of Justice that will come out in the John Durham report classified annex.
So what I think I hear you saying is there is still an opportunity for indictments, potential prosecutions, accountability from those people who may have lied under oath, like John Brennan, James Comey, and perhaps Hillary Clinton.
Well, that's why I've made the referrals that I have. For a 4-year period of time, the truth about the origins of the Russia collusion hoax was hidden from the American people. And unfortunately, Maria, as you recall, those same people were already at that point in time onto their next hoax, the Hunter Biden laptop. This was a month before the 2020 election. And unfortunately, what we saw with Joe Biden's election was another 4 years to be able to continue to bury the truth. And so it's only now, with Donald Trump having been reelected, that through D&I Gabbard, myself, Pam Bondi, Kash Patel, all of this intelligence, all of this evidence that's been hidden and buried from the American people is finally coming to light.
Yeah.
And hearing all of those clips, I think back to the stolen election of 2020 and think about what we wouldn't know had Donald Trump won that election. He had the people in place, the deep state was functioning perfectly. They were as healthy as ever while President Trump was in office. And then you get to another hoax. There's the Hunter Biden laptop, as Ratcliffe said there. Then you get to the COVID scam. And then Trump is out, and there's another 4 years of Biden to continue burying all this. And then miraculously, President Donald Trump wins in 2024. And now we can get back to seeing these things revealed. One thing that strikes me in hearing a lot of these interviews is what guys like Devin Nunes and John Ratcliffe knew coming into 2020. What they would have known was going on. And I don't blame them for let the process play out. We know what we know. But to think of them seeing all of these redacted documents, and then Biden comes in, and you wonder what is going to happen here. And if a Democrat had seen what they were seeing about Barack Obama, if a Democrat had seen that about Donald Trump, that would be leaked in a second. They leak lies all the time. That's how they shift the narrative. But to think about the powerful truth that these men saw and are just sitting there wondering, well, that was really bad. It'd be nice if there's some accountability for it. Again, maybe they were waiting for the process to play out, but how far is that going to go? How many more hoaxes, how much more destruction do you take until you finally say, hey, I've got to talk about what I've seen in the annex of the Durham report. I've got to talk about the 2020 Intelligence Committee report that was compiled by Republicans that we weren't allowed to see for 4 or 5 years, exposing all of this. Now, God obviously works on a different timetable. I'm sure these men weren't waiting on God, but now we see it all finally coming together after almost a decade of this. When you think about Donald Trump coming down the escalator, God works on a different timetable. Well, welcome back to the Trumpet Daily. I'm Sam Livingston. I'll be your guest host for today's show. If you have any comments or feedback for the show, don't forget to send those to td@thetrumpet.com. Don't forget to subscribe to us on Rumble or on YouTube as well. I wanted to read a quote from America Under Attack, and this is talking about John Ratcliffe. It's talking about an interview that he gave back in 2021, again with Maria Bartiromo, and he's talking about the indictment of Igor Danchenko. Danchenko was Christopher Steele's source. He was the Russian that Steele was conspiring with, and Danchenko, if you recall, was just making all of this stuff up. It was the bar talk. I don't remember exactly all of the details. I think it was, not Mark Elias, the other lawyer for the DNC that worked with Danchenko, and then there's just this big circle where they drop a lie in there, and then they just keep laundering the lie, cleaning it up. Oh, it came from this person. That's another source. We've got 3 or 4 sources corroborating all of this intel that we have, when it really all was coming from one place. So Ratcliffe does this interview, and this is Mr. Gerald Fleury's reaction to this interview that was exposing this lie laundering operation. Mr. Fleury writes, "That interview with Ratcliffe stunned me. I thought these amazing revelations would spread through the news outlets like a shockwave. This information could not be more significant. It is about treason against our country and the very future of freedom in America." Who was talking about treason? Nobody would use that phrase. No one would say it. No one was strong enough to say what this was. And this was just 3 or 4 years ago. And we were saying it in 2017 and 2018, right as it was happening. Mr. Gerald Fleury was saying that. He continues in America Under Attack, "Yet news executives and anchors were and are uninterested. Almost no one has the courage to speak out against Barack Obama. In that same interview, Ratcliffe said the truth will defend itself." Mr. Fleury writes, "That is true, but we have seen and are seeing that if no one loves the truth and fights for it, the truth can be cast down and trampled." We're seeing some people with a bit of resolve to fight for it, but we're also seeing God expose a lot of this and doing it on His timetable. But so few people cared about this scandal. I mean, this was a huge scandal, and we knew pretty much most of it in 2017 and 2018. If you go back to President Trump's tweet in March of 2017, he says, "Obama wiretapped Trump Tower." And then everybody comes out and says, that's a falsehood. He didn't literally. Yes, Obama did not walk into Trump Tower and put the little device on Donald Trump's phone in the executive office of Trump Tower. But they knew, they saw the documents. They knew that those FISA documents were corrupt. And nobody would fight for the truth. And that's kind of the theme that I just want to thread throughout this program. We'll talk a little bit about Israel in the second half of this show. But think about the events that have transpired just in the last 3 or 4 years. Think about Barack Obama being silenced losing that power. And now you've got media figures, and quite a few on Fox, who, if you think back to a lot of the conservative media landscape just 2 or 3 years ago, who could forget the New York Post when President Trump announced his campaign for the 2024 election? The little banner on the bottom, Florida man announces campaign for President of the United States. These people didn't care. And all of this is being revealed and exposed, and this is just some little minor detail. Fox News was the same way. Can't touch President Trump anymore because the election's steal, and we don't want to get sued again. We can't afford another $700 million settlement. We're not going to fight that in court. I mean, nobody would talk about the truth, and now there's a bit of a narrative shift. There's a momentum shift. Obama being silenced. Trump, again, winning that election. Trump not getting killed on July 13th, 2024. And then you look now at how these criminals are squirming. Look at the media shift. Again, maybe man's system can't bring justice. I mean, they find every little way out of accountability. They've got teams of lawyers who will find the tiniest little loophole to get out of it. But God is exposing things and exposing them in miraculous ways for you to see what was happening to your country. This article from Jonathan Turley, it's titled "The Key Players in the Russia Collusion Hoax and Why They're Sweating Now." The release of declassified material has shed new light on the creation of the Russian collusion investigation, and many of the names are crushingly familiar. Indeed, Congress is moving to round up the usual suspects in light of the new revelations. It is the story of the real Russian conspiracy, how high-ranking officials in the Obama administration seeded this false claim with the help of an eager, unquestioning press corps. How is there not a Russiagate commission already set up? Why hasn't Mike Johnson hired ABC TV journalists or editors to compile this big, beautiful hearing and subpoena all of these people and have them come in and explain? Put these documents in front of John Brennan. What do you mean? Well, it rings true. So you just ignored the 2 or 3 top Russian analysts you had that said this is garbage, and make him answer that question in front of the whole country. Maybe he doesn't go to jail, but then the whole nation sees how corrupt these people were. You know, if Donald Trump did anything, he didn't even have to do anything close to this, and they did that to him. Imagine if he concocted a conspiracy like this when Biden was coming into office. I mean, they're blowing up. Well, when Donald Trump says that Obama committed treason, well, the penalty for treason is the death sentence, so Trump is calling for Obama to be killed, and that's so unpresidential. If that happened, again, turn the tables. It's a very easy point to make all the time. Trump would probably be dead already. I mean, and that's not for lack of trying. They have tried to kill him already. Turley says, not surprisingly, the media, which spent years repeating the false Russia collusion claims, is doing a full court press to kill the story. This is the giveaway, is how they react to these stories, because the media is complicit. And Jim Comey would do it all the time. Every time something bad about Jim Comey was about to come out, boom, he's on CNN. He's doing the rounds, because that's his time in court, pretty much. The CNN and MSNBC give him that platform to plead his case in front of the whole country, because they're all part of it. They couldn't do it without MSNBC and CNN. Turley says, yet many of these key figures are retaining counsel in anticipation of the unfolding investigation. Many previously secured contracts with MSNBC or CNN or book deals where they doubled down on the false claims detailed in these new documents. Think about how sick all of this is. They didn't just carry out this treasonous coup. They kept it going all the way up to, I would say, to 2024 and that election. And they get cushy jobs with the regime media, where they make money lying about what they did, and then they write books to make even more money about it. I would say just based on that alone, if you're talking about statute of limitations, the conspiracy is ongoing. If you're making money off of those book deals and you are writing that based on the privileged information that you had as a government official, which all of them are, it's open season. Why should you continue to be protected for that? Anyway, he goes on and talks about why John Brennan is probably the most vulnerable right now, because Brennan would outright just said, well, we didn't use the Steele dossier as part of the intelligence community assessment that was released on January 6, 2017, the ICA. So just a blatant lie, and they want to have him in for more hearings because either they say what they did or they perjure themselves. And there isn't a way out of it now if Republicans have the will to push them. Turley says Brennan not only intervened to include the dossier, but overruled the CIA's two most senior Russia experts who said it did not meet even the most basic tradecraft standards. One analyst recounted how Brennan refused to remove it, and when confronted with the dossier's main flaws, responded, "Yes, but doesn't it ring true?" Isn't that just how a good communist thinks? Yeah, but it rings true. This is the dark arts of politicizing intelligence. This is what Obama was good at. This is what Ben Rhodes and Obama and Jake Sullivan, they all did it for the Iran deal. They did it for Rouhani when he came in as the new moderate president of Iran. They cook it up. They cook up these intelligence reports. And then they say, well, this is the official position of the United States based on the greatest intelligence apparatus in human history. The dark arts of political intelligence. And you look at guys the dark arts comment is from Andrew McCarthy in Ball of Collusion. And boy, you just don't see him out as much anymore. You make a comment like that and you're getting into the spiritual realm with the way these people think and how demonic and evil it is. As Mr. Fleury writes, "An America Under Attack." I saw a tweet from Andy McCarthy, and he was apologizing because he wasn't stronger about this. A lot of people, this is their career, is this court system or the FISA courts or federal prosecutors, and they want to defend the institution at all cost. And just don't realize or care to expose the rot that is there. Notice this clip. This is from John Brennan. This was back in October of 2017, after he'd lied about the Steele dossier. But just look at the body language here, and how can you reach any other conclusion other than that this man is up to something nefarious? This is clip 1.
We have to talk about the Trump Tower meeting where you guys go and talk to the president-elect, show him the evidence, talk turkey to him about what it really was. Can you take me there, talk about at least what you were trying to convey and how that went?
No, we had a meeting with Mr. Trump at Trump Tower, and it was several hours long. We talked to him about what it is that we knew and assessed. We talked about what the Russian objectives were, what the capabilities are, and it was a back and forth. But I'm not going to get into details.
Did you give him the full Monty? Was it everything? Was it the hard stuff?
We provided to him the briefing that, as president-elect, he deserved to get.
Yeah. What does that mean?
He does not want to talk about that. He does not want to get into that subject. That's a lot of those frontline interviews. I go back to those quite a bit because they did them in 2017. There's another one with Jake Sullivan, who was working for the Hillary campaign, and he talks about how, well, as soon as those emails dropped in July of 2016 during the DNC, I think that was in Milwaukee or wherever, He said they knew immediately it was the Russians. And he and Jen Palmyre, they hop on the golf cart and they're going to all the media tents. This is Russia hacking the election. We know. And even in that moment, and Jake Sullivan says it in that Frontline interview, well, they were skeptical. It wasn't long, though, for all of them to get on board. It didn't take long for them to figure out, oh, wait. Oh, yeah, you're right. It was the Russians. And it's just Russia, 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 like Donald Trump says, for 10 years. And then to act like it's just a shoulder shrug. We've moved on. And now John Brennan, I mean, they're out again. They're coming out again to defend themselves. And of course, CNN, MSNBC right there to give them a platform. This is clip 8.
I think we should start the conversation at the fact that the White House and the administration are promising, it seems, to use the full weight and power of the government to try and paint Barack Obama and many others as treasonous to this country. And to be clear, unless it's changed, being guilty of treason is punishable by death in this country. That's what happens if you're found guilty of treason. This is a moment that is shocking. We shouldn't be surprised, but I am still shocked.
Yeah, well, I think it's a real mark of desperation that they have resurrected an 8.5-year-old intelligence community assessment claiming that President Obama and national security officials were involved in this conspiracy, a cabal that was trying to undermine President-elect Trump. I would like to think that all Americans are outraged over that. I'd like to think that Donald Trump and the Republican Party should be outraged over it as well. But clearly they are not, and now they're using this, I think, as a very shiny distraction in order to, shift the attention away from some of his other problems.
I don't even have a lot to say about that. A shiny distraction. You think about what they have accused Donald Trump of. To accuse Barack Obama of treason, that's as un-American as it gets. But then Brennan there, this is 8.5 years old. That's 8.5 years old. Let's move on from this. You go back and look at some of the details about what they did to Richard Nixon, and boy, the communists they win that media war, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. And then they own that story for 2 or 3 years, and they run that story through in the textbooks, the media. That's doctrine. And then, boy, it gets exposed 6, 7, 8, 30, 40 years later. But that line, that propaganda is set. And there are a lot of people, you cannot change their mind on this subject because it was so relentless for those 3 or 4 years. Donald Trump is Russia's puppet, Putin's puppet, just over and over again. And now it's 8.5 years. What are we doing talking about this story? I mean, that's the way they love to operate. Turley gets into, James Clapper talks about why he's the probably the next one on the list that would be in the most jeopardy or most vulnerable right now at this moment. And remember, Clapper, he is the one that leaked all those documents to Tapper, Clapper to Tapper, the dossier that they had gone to Trump Tower and briefed President-elect Trump on the Steele dossier. That was the news peg that Tapper needed, because even Jake Tapper, who gets on there and just acts so shocked by things sometimes, he even said, we can't talk about the Steele dossier. It's garbage, it's made up. But if you can give me something that makes it credible, like the FBI is looking at it. President Trump's been briefed on it. And Clapper is right there, happy to oblige Jake Tapper. I'll give you whatever you need. Hey, we concocted this assessment. Obama wanted it. He wanted it December 6th, 7th. We announced on December 9th. The Washington Post and New York Times knew exactly what the conclusion of this very thorough report was going to be. Then we have the report, January 5th. Obama talks about, what are we going to do with this? We're going to be out of office in 2 weeks. January 6th, well, we're going to brief President Trump on it. January 7th through 9, James Clapper's running over to CNN, This is how it's being used. The Steele dossier is in this intelligence report, even though Brennan lies and says it's not. President Trump is looking at it. The FBI is looking at it. Jake Tapper, it's very official now. I have the news peg because I am a very credible journalist, and I'm going to do my job, and I'm going to be very thorough about it, and I would never spread propaganda. They're just regime mouthpieces. You look at some of these stories, and Turley gets into it. I could rant for hours about some of these things. Jim Comey and when he had his briefing with President Trump, I think it was the same that January 6th day, and all of his notes from those meetings, again, privileged documents, he keeps them in a safe in his basement. They never get classified. They're never handed over, even after he's taken out of office. So he is hoarding classified documents, stealing government documents, government property. There's no raid like the raid on Mar-a-Lago. We'll get into that in a bit. And then when he's caught, they have the FBI at this moment retroactively decide that those documents weren't classified. It was okay for Jim Comey to take them. And who decided that they weren't classified? I mean, it's so evil, but it's like comical, and how audacious these people are. Who got to decide that those documents weren't classified that Jim Comey stole? Peter Strzok and Lisa Page, Jim Comey's best friends. Again, look at how the perpetrators are reacting. Look at the regime media providing this mouthpiece. Here comes as a clip of Eric Holder, the wingman, Obama's wingman, Attorney General. Here are his comments about what the Trump Justice Department is up to. Clip 7.
This administration has used the Justice Department, has used the power, the investigatory power of the Justice Department to target political opponents of the president. I mean, you've seen Donald Trump talk about a whole range of things, most ridiculous, to talk about the possibility of indicting, prosecuting for treason Barack Obama. I mean, you know, these are dangerous kinds of things that this president is talking about. And I'm really concerned that this Justice Department, under Bondi, under Patel, will do things that are inconsistent with the traditions of the department and put at risk the lives and well-being of many people in this country who are, for whatever reason, politically opposed to or take political positions that are inconsistent with the desires of this president.
Can you believe how arrogant these people are? They're doing something, Eric Holder says, that's inconsistent with the traditions of the department. Boy, if I was Pam Bondi, if I was Kash Patel, we're going to do to you what you did to us. The tradition of this institution is that we use it for political ops to go after our political opponents. I'm not saying that's right. But boy, for him inconsistent with the traditions. All Pam Bondi and Kash Patel have to do is uphold the law, uphold the rules, and hold them accountable. You don't have to doctor up any documents. You don't have to forge anything. You just have to expose. Take out the redactions. Let's see the end of the Durham report that we were never allowed to see. Let's see all of the documents from the House Intelligence Committees that, again, we weren't allowed to see. John Cass writes, when Obama began strangling the Republic by the book, he says, it's all coming out now, isn't it? The deep state rats are scurrying for cover, the terriers scratching at the rat holes. On Tuesday, President Trump, well, just goes through some of the details here. He talks about Obama's coup. He says, Obama kills the republic he hates, and the institutional left that serves Obama, the universities, and the broken corporate media guard Obama's back. Oh, one more thing about the phenomenon of Obama's deep state coup derailing the Trump administration. You need the media. Without the media, it won't work. But in Obama's case, he had the American corporate news media eating from the palm of his hand. Just one hoax after another, a rolling coup. And you get to events like the Mar-a-Lago raid in Hunter Biden's laptop. It just kept going. And that Mar-a-Lago raid, I don't have time to play the clips, but Ratcliffe and Nunes are saying, what was the point of that? Why did they go after him for those classified documents? And it probably gets back to the big binder that Donald Trump took to go and take that and to make Trump look like a fugitive. What a change, what a shift. I think that was August 8th, 2022. In just 2 years, just how dramatically things have changed. Well, that point that Cass makes about how you need the media. Think about that even in Israel's war in Gaza and how much Hamas needs the media. I mean, it's pretty much all that's keeping Hamas alive at this point is not Al Jazeera, not Middle East media, Western media. This another quote, I was just these stories are intertwining because so much of it gets back to just what is the truth. Just show what the facts are. I don't need John Brennan's spin on it, just show what it was. This is, again, in America Under Attack. Mr. Fleury writing about how Adam Schiff would get on TV and lie about what he had seen in these intelligence hearings. He wrote Schiff, a radical leftist, immediately went out and publicly said that Trump colluded with Russia and that he had evidence of it. That is the way leftists routinely lie. They are brazen like demons, and virtually nobody holds them accountable. As the prophet Isaiah wrote, judgment is turned away backward, and justice stands afar off. For truth is fallen in the street, and equity cannot enter. Truth is fallen in the street, and we're getting a little bit of truth. We're getting a little bit of this exposed. Again, for you to ask some hard questions. We need to ask hard questions about this country and the course that it's on. And what will President Trump do when he learns all of this? You're going to be held accountable for what you know. Well, in that context, I wanted to get into Israel and its ongoing war in Gaza, and just focusing again on this war with the media, because the truth is fallen in Israel. There's the war with guns and bombs, and in many ways that's the easier war. It's this propaganda war. It's this fight with BBC and Western media, the Associated Press and Reuters, that Israel has to put in even more effort to fight against. Melanie Phillips has a great article titled "Civilization Fails the Test Again." It says the echoes of October 7 were unmistakable and horrifying. For several days last week, the Druze of Sweda in southern Syria were subjected to a barbaric onslaught by government troops controlled by the new Syrian president Abu Muhammad al-Jalani, as well as attacks by Bedouins and other jihadists. An estimated 1,000 Druze as well as Christians were slaughtered. Men were beheaded, women raped, children shot in front of their parents. An elderly Druze man was burned alive in his wheelchair. And another October 7 happening, this time in Syria, and Christians were killed. But where's the Western media to talk about this? Where's President Trump? Instead, he just has the strong phone call to Bibi and says, he's a madman. What's he doing in Syria? It's getting in the way because we want to work with Jalani. He won't call Jalani and say, get these guys under control. And Christians are being killed as well. I'll talk about that story in a minute. If a Catholic church in Gaza, I was surprised to learn there is one there, gets hit by, just grazed by an IDF bullet, the Pope swoops into Gaza and Trump is on the phone immediately with Bibi. What's going on? Why are Christians being attacked by the IDF? But it's happening in Syria, and Syria's been a mess for 15 years now. And Israel's the only country that stepped up in 15 years to say, hey, this massacre cannot be allowed to occur. And they are attacked by the West. Stay out. Stop meddling. You're making it hard for us to make a deal with the al-Qaeda leader of Syria. Phillips says, from all those who over the past 21 months have posed as driven by conscience to support the oppressed Arabs of Gaza, there was now only silence. The whole weekend was pictures of these starving children in Gaza. And the New York Times, I think it was above the fold, it's this awful picture of this suffering little child. And it's famine in Gaza, children are starving. And you know what? It turns out that child was born with this illness. I think it was cerebral palsy. And the shameless media says this is the result of Israel's blockade on Gaza. As these starving little children. Boy, they know how to sell it. They know how to pull at your heart showing those pictures. And the West, they just lap it right up. And not even that, we'll talk about that in a little bit. How is it Israel's responsibility? When have you ever heard of a war like this where Israel is attacked and they are fighting back against this force that wants to blot them off of the face of the earth, and it's Israel's responsibility to feed them and keep them all alive? Not the government's job, which is Hamas in Gaza. I've got quite a few quotes on that. Melanie says there was no condemnation from the likes of Amnesty. This is talking about what happened in Syria. Until several days after the massacres, Human Rights Watch that constantly flay Israel over fabricated crimes against humanity. There was muted protest from church bodies, even though a Christian pastor and his entire family of 20 were slaughtered. Instead, there was outrage over the accidental damage done by the IDF to a Catholic church in Gaza when shrapnel from a strike on a nearby terrorist target hit part of the church and tragically killed 3 people. Israel is held to an impossible standard. They're in Syria fighting to protect Christians from terrorists, fighting to protect Druze, and then a little slip up in Gaza as they're fighting more terrorists there, and the Western world just jumps on them immediately. Politico, Israel apologizes for deadly strike on Gaza Catholic Church, like it was intentional. A deadly strike. Israel apologizes for deadly strike on Gaza Catholic Church after Trump call. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu apologized on Thursday, this is last week I think, for a strike on Gaza's only Catholic church, which killed 3 people, following criticism he received from President Donald Trump. I mean, America was mad. Not about Syria, about this church. I mean, if you think about the war that Bibi is trying to wage, it's like, it's so surgical. He's got to be so precise about every little thing, or everybody blows up at him. And while he's expected to carry out this surgery, there's the room, there's an earthquake, and the lights are falling, and everything's falling out down around him. And if he makes one little slip up, it's, how dare you? How could you possibly do this? Genocide. I mean, it's an impossible standard that only Israel is held up to. Not expected of anybody else. Emmanuel Macron, who just recognized the Palestinian state, not expected, doesn't expect them to keep a standard the way Israel does. Nobody fights a war the way Israel does. And in some ways, you could say it probably hurts them. You know, just get on with it and finish the war and let the rest of the world follow your lead. Stop trying to please the West. I mean, this has been Israel's history dealing with the West since before it was even a country. There's always this back and forth. I think it was Nixon when the Yom Kippur War was the same way. You can have weapons. No, you can't have weapons. We're not going to give you jets. You can't have jets. I mean, Israel just needs to go and finish the job. I mean, you look at what Hamas, the atrocities that they've perpetrated, and how somehow, and again, thanks to the media, Israel is the bad guy. Israel is expected to feed all of the Gazans. Not if this were any other war, it would be our population is starving, we can't get food, we are going to surrender because we will cease to exist. But that's what the West doesn't understand about the enemy that they're dealing with. And it's like Melanie Phillips, she even said it in Mr. Fleury's interview with her a couple weeks ago. This is a death cult. The way they operate, they will sacrifice as many of their own people as they have to. They love cashing in on this tragedy. The starving children, that works to Hamas's advantage because the lapdog media in the West hates Israel more than they hate Hamas. That's the reality of it. Again, Israel's hardest war in many ways is this propaganda war against Western media. Melanie writes, almost every day Hamas has claimed Israel is deliberately killing Gazans queuing for food. It is in fact mainly Hamas that's been killing hundreds of them to prevent them from receiving the aid that threatens to bring about the terrorist group's final defeat. This is Hamas's lifeline, and Israel is going way beyond what it should be doing, and they send the IDF in there to bring food to these individuals, and Hamas infiltrates the crowds, they open fire, they want to create chaos, they shoot at the IDF retaliates, and some civilians are killed in that process. And now it's the evil genocidal Israelis trying to feed the Gazans, who are just, I'll read one of the stories, opening fire on the Gazans. And then they run to the BBC with these stories like, well, the IDF, they're not just indiscriminately shooting at the Gazans. We've had children come into the hospital and they are being targeted for certain body parts. And then Melanie writes, there's no way to prove any of that because you don't know who shot them when they're brought to the hospital. More than likely, if they're coming in with those sorts of injuries, it was Hamas who was shooting them and sending them in and saying it was the Israelis at the food line. Maynard, he's this journalist for the BBC, he's a surgeon, but he was talking to the BBC. His name is Nick Maynard, and this is again quoting from Phillips' article. Maynard claimed that IDF soldiers were not only deliberately shooting Gazan children queuing for food, but were choosing to target different body parts depending on the day of the week, almost as if a game was being played. And she writes, on Monday, the British government, along with 27 other Western countries, published a preposterous denunciation of Israel for the inhumane killing of Gazans seeking aid and denying essential humanitarian assistance for the civilian population. This, despite Israel facilitating the delivery of thousands of tons of aid and millions of meals to Gazans rather than allowing Hamas to steal it. And of course, they threw in the contested claim of settler violence. This is a seismic moment, she writes. Civilization is being tested by a culture of death. Israel is meeting the challenge and will survive. Britain is going down, firing at Israel as it does so. America and Britain, they buy into this propaganda, and it's not hard to see through it. It's not a new thing that the Palestinians have come up with. I was just going through a little bit of this book, The Other War, by Sarah Gutman, and the Associated Press would do this all the time. Well, we have 350 journalists in Jerusalem, none in Gaza, but the Gazan photographers, they tell us that this is the context of this photograph that was taken. And the New York Times doesn't care that somehow these journalist photographers happen to be at exactly the points where the walls are being broken down on October 7, 2023. The colluding with the terrorists. That's how shameful the Western media is. Phillips, in another article titled The Worldwide Frenzy Against Israel. Over the past few days, she just talks about how this food shortage is all of the headlines right now. I mean, President Trump is making a big deal about it. I just want them fed. I want them fed. And it apparently is Israel's fault that they're not being fed. Israel, again, is going way beyond what any other nation would be expected to do, and is sending in their own troops to try to feed them at their own risk, because when you airdrop the food in, it's the Hamas soldiers that go and get it. And then they hold that food and they don't feed their people, and then, well, it's Israel's fault that they're starving. Phillips writes again about how this anti-Semitism is spreading around the world. Talks about a man screaming in London at a Jewish broadcaster, calling him fascist Zionist scum. A woman at a Jewish restaurant in London, someone approached her and asked if she was Jewish and then threw food at her. There was this cruise ship that arrived in Greece, and there were protesters that wouldn't let the Jewish tourists off the boat. There was a plane in France where this summer camp of Jewish kids, they were singing a song in Hebrew, and they were all thrown off the flight, and the camp counselor was arrested, thrown to the ground. And there's pictures, I need to go back and see if this is accurate, but the pilot in the cockpit who initiated all this has a Palestinian flag behind his seat. Not a plane I would get on if a terrorist is flying the plane. You look at this rise in anti-Semitism, I mean, this is history again repeating itself. The last 80 years have been the exception in history, but these attacks on the Jewish people, Mr. Fleury gave a forum about it the other day to the campers. It precedes World War II. There are pogroms in Russia before World War I. The Zionist movement, it was started by a man who died in 1904, so this is before even the 20th century. Another good article in the Free Press by Matt Friedman. Is Gaza starving? Searching for the truth in an information war. They talk about that photo, he writes about that photo I mentioned in the New York Times of that starving child. Again, they're not like blurry cell phone photos. These are professional journalists going in and taking these pictures. And they lie about it. They put their description on the photo. The New York Times, okay, well, the Gazan journalist said it. And they're not allowed to say anything that Hamas won't let them. Well, we'll publish that. We don't need to verify what that picture is. Notice this clip. This is, I think, from last year. This is, again, the war in Gaza is ongoing. And this is Dennis Prager. He's pro-Israel. He's debating with someone named Dave Smith. And Dave Smith, I don't know why he's given a platform, again, on a lot of conservative outlets to be the figurehead for the argument of the left. I think he's a Jewish comedian. And a lot of his points are just don't make any sense. But notice what Prager's rebuttal is to one of his comments. This is clip 9.
Let's take this one group for a second, the innocent Palestinians. At a certain point, I think the question needs to be asked, does Israel have a right to do what it's been doing to the innocent Palestinians for many, many decades now?
Every analogy could have been applied to Nazi Germany. There were innocent Germans who were killed by the Allies in the bombing and in invasions and so on. No one denies that. But to point out that there were innocent Germans while the Nazis were in charge is a morally idiotic point. It means nothing. It only means that every innocent German's life that was taken is the responsibility of the Nazis. Every innocent Palestinian life that has been taken is the responsibility of Hamas.
That's exactly right. It's a war. That's the way war has always been. Until the Jews start fighting back. Until the Jews have a country to fight back. They're held to an impossible standard. Friedman writes, you might have thought that hunger in Gaza would work against Hamas, forcing the group to have mercy on its own civilians and accept the ceasefire desired by Israel and the U.S. and currently under discussion in Qatar. But Hamas knows that the opposite is true. The disaster they've engineered in Gaza fuels the global campaign against Israel. In some ways, you can see that this means they are desperate, that Israel's winning, because they have to ramp up the propaganda. They have to They need this famine. It's Hamas's lifeline. The best thing for those innocent Gazans, the few of them that are there, is for Israel to finish the war and not worry about the West. Friedman says that's presumably why the crescendo of hunger stories coincided on Friday with reports that Hamas has now hardened its position in the talks leading to their suppression. And this is a tool that they use, starving their own people. And because they know that it's the only way they can stay in power. Friedman concludes, one of the terrible facts of this war is that the Palestinians who started the war and who constructed the twisted battlefield on which it has been fought won't act to save their own people. Starvation and death serve the Hamas plan. That means that Israel must decide how far it wants to push and when to stop. And this couldn't happen. Like John Cass said about the deep state, like those quotes I read in the first half, it can't happen without the media. It can't happen without all of those cameramen there lying about the photographs they're taking. Hamas's greatest ally, in many ways, is Western media. Look at this war on truth. That's the other war. You see it in the United States. You see it in Israel, a nation that's fighting for its survival. It's proof that this is not God's world. This is Satan's world. Read it in 2 Corinthians 4 and verse 4. And then read John 8 and verse 44 where it says there's no truth in him. We have to fight for the truth because that's the way of this world, is that it's just lies. Constantly lies. And when there's one little country in the Middle East that tries to stand up for what's right, for the truth, to defend actually innocent people, they are attacked relentlessly. I want to conclude today's show with just another quote from America Under Attack, because there's so much in this book that goes even beyond just the deep state. It's this attack on truth. Mr. Fleury says, when human beings reject God's truth, they start worshiping their own opinions. They start thinking like Satan. When this type of thinking becomes entrenched enough, people stop even caring about the difference between true and false. This is the only way to explain these events. And a lot of people, they're sharp. They can see a lot of it. But how do you explain the spirit behind all of this? How do you explain that without the Bible, without Genesis 1 through 3, without mystery of the ages? Mr. Fleury says they start trying to magically create reality where no reality is. We see a lot of fake realities, fabricated realities in this world. Mr. Fleury says Satan's broadcasts make us impervious to reason if we allow it. That is the New Age Hitler worked toward. That is the world Satan wants. He writes a little bit further on, Bible prophecy shows that will worship is going to lead to fierce, intense suffering, even worse than it did in World War II. Look at the rise of anti-Semitism around the world. The only way, he writes, the only way to escape the devastating catastrophes prophesied to engulf America is to be rooted in truth, based on the Word of God. We need the truth. We have to be grounded and settled in the truth. If you haven't, request America Under Attack. I apologize. There are about 40 books and booklets up here, and I can't find America Under Attack. But if you haven't subscribed to the Trumpet magazine, here's a copy of the latest, the Rising Lion Trumpet magazine. Get a free 1-year subscription to this magazine. Oh, there's America Under Attack. It was hiding under the Trumpet magazine. Again, request this book if you haven't. All of our literature is free. Don't forget to send any comments that you have for the show to td@thetrumpet.com. Thank you so much for joining us on today's show. Mr. Stephen Fleury should be back with you again tomorrow.